It's a strange kind of fear, the moment you let your mind wander into doubt. Not even full disbelief, just the quiet whisper that something might not add up. That maybe, just maybe, what you've always believed wasn't your belief at all. That maybe you inherited it like your last name, not chosen, just handed down. And yet the guilt comes rushing in. Why is that? Why does questioning God feel so much like betrayal? Not just spiritual betrayal, but personal, emotional, almost like betraying your own blood. This isn't just a theological question. It's a deeply psychological one. Because religion for many people is not simply about beliefs. It's about belonging, about identity, about memory and culture and roots. It's not just God you're questioning. It's your parents, your grandparents, the entire structure of your childhood. It's the smell of food during holidays, the cadence of prayers whispered before bed, the feeling of being held in something bigger than yourself, even if you never fully understood what that was. So when someone questions the existence of God, the reaction often isn't logical. It's emotional. It hits the same nerve as questioning a parent's love or a family's values. Doubt gets tangled in loyalty. And for many, loyalty is sacred. But here's the thing. Loyalty and truth aren't always on the same team. The social psychology behind this is fascinating. Studies have shown that belief systems rooted in childhood, especially those reinforced by family, become emotionally coded. They aren't just opinions you carry, they're part of your emotional survival system. Questioning them triggers stress, cortisol, discomfort. It feels dangerous. Because somewhere deep in the brain, the tribal wiring kicks in and says, disloyalty equals isolation equals danger. The fear isn't just of being wrong, it's of being alone. That's why so many people stay quiet. Not because they truly believe, but because speaking out would cause relational earthquakes. And they know it. They know the look their mother would give them, or the conversation their uncle would try to have, or the silence that might follow. Because when belief is tied to identity, when it becomes a kind of cultural glue, challenging it feels like threatening the whole structure. In fact, religion often functions as a kind of social cement. It binds families together across generations. It shapes traditions, rituals, and even moral language. And the more deeply it's tied to culture, whether you're Catholic, Muslim, Hindu, or from any tradition, the more it becomes a kind of shorthand for who we are. So when someone steps outside of that belief, it's rarely seen as an intellectual shift. It's seen as abandonment. Not always in dramatic ways, but in subtle ones. The slight awkwardness at the dinner table. The "we're praying for you" comments that aren't really about prayer. The polite exclusion from conversations that once felt safe. And sometimes outright conflict. This is why many people describe the process of losing religion as a kind of grief. Not just because they stop believing in something, but because of what they lose socially, community, ritual, the sense of being part of a collective story. And that loss is real, whether or not you believe the story was true. It's also why many people, even those with deep doubts, choose to compartmentalize, to perform belief, to nod along, to attend the services, say the prayers, participate in the rituals, even when the meaning has quietly drained away, because it keeps the peace, it avoids the confrontation, it protects relationships. But here's the cost. When belief becomes performance, something starts to break. There's a slow erosion of authenticity, of trust, of personal truth. The more we pretend to believe, the harder it becomes to be known. Really known. And deep down, most people want to be known. Now, it's important to recognize that this isn't just about personal psychology. It's about how religion has structured itself historically. In many traditions, questioning faith isn't framed as an intellectual exercise. It's framed as rebellion, as pride, as moral failure, which means that doubt isn't just disagreement, it's sin. So when someone starts asking honest questions, they're often made to feel like they're the problem, like something's wrong with them. And that's a powerful deterrent, because nobody wants to be the outsider, the apostate, the one who turned their back. This social pressure creates an environment where conformity is safer than curiosity. And that's no accident. Over centuries, religious systems have evolved to sustain themselves by discouraging internal critique, by equating faith with virtue and doubt with shame. In some cultures, even today, leaving the faith doesn't just lead to emotional exile, it can lead to actual exile, or worse. But even in places where freedom of belief is protected, the emotional consequences remain. People report losing friends, being disowned, facing awkward family interventions, or quiet, persistent disappointment from loved ones who feel they've failed in passing down the faith. That's why it takes courage to question. Not because the questions are so intellectually difficult, but because of what those questions might cost you personally. And yet, isn't honesty worth that cost? Isn't there something admirable, even noble, about following the evidence where it leads, even when it's uncomfortable? In many ways, this is the real test of integrity, choosing truth over comfort, even when it creates conflict. And that's not just about religion. It applies to anything deeply tied to our identity, politics, ideology, family values. When we start to question what we've always assumed, we risk being seen as ungrateful, rebellious, or disloyal. But sometimes, questioning is the most honest thing a person can do. It's not an attack, it's not betrayal, it's growth. Still, the guilt can be hard to shake, and part of that comes from how we're conditioned. From early on, we're taught that certain beliefs are sacred, not to be touched, not to be scrutinized, and over time that message gets internalized. Even when we know better, we still feel bad for thinking otherwise. That's the residue of indoctrination, the emotional hangover of ideas we no longer hold but still feel bound by. But here's the good news. That feeling of guilt, it fades. Over time, as we build new frameworks, as we reconnect with ourselves on our own terms, that heaviness begins to lift, and it's replaced by something lighter. Not arrogance, not certainty, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from knowing you're not lying to yourself anymore. There's a quiet power in that, in living without pretending, in being able to look your past in the eye without resentment and say, I understand why you believed, but I see it differently now. And that's okay. Because maturity isn't just about finding answers. It's about asking better questions and allowing ourselves the freedom to explore them without fear of punishment or shame. The real betrayal isn't in questioning. It's in staying silent when we know we're not being honest, with ourselves or others. There's a quote by Carl Sagan that comes to mind. It is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. And while letting go of inherited belief can be painful, it can also be freeing. It opens the door to new ways of thinking, of relating, of being. It allows us to create meaning, not just inherit it. To love our families without sharing every belief, to honor our past without being trapped by it, and to step into our own lives, fully, authentically, and without apology. Because truth isn't betrayal. It's a beginning.